Hello, I'm Adam Green,
I'm Lauren Freeman.
and we are from Platinum Edge Solutions. And today we are going to be covering how to use quality assurance and your internal teams to make extensions better, be it updating a current extension or building one from the ground up. We're going to try to cover how to make that better and what you can do.
Okay, so we're going to introduce ourselves a little bit. I'm Lauren Freeman, and I've been a developer at PEZ for a bit over a year now, and I've worked on a couple of different extensions. Outside of work, though, I also love sewing. My fun fact about me, I've been making costumes for about 7 years now. There's a couple of them that I think are pretty fun.
And I have been at PEZ now for almost 5 years. I started on April Fool's Day in 2019. I started out in a client-facing role, moved to QA, ended up being at the head of QA for a little bit, and now I am currently the account manager. So I've been through just about every level of the company at this point and through managing extensions other than the development of them. Basically, I'm just the professional talking person at the company. Everybody else does the important work. I don't have any good talents, but I do have some adorable cats and a fun CET Experience Easter egg back there for anybody that was around the last few years. Platinum Edge Solutions has been around 5 years now. Started in 2018 with an ex-configuring. We went from 3 employees at that point to now actually we're at 13 across the board, which is fantastic, and we are continuing to hire more people all the time. Our specialty is full PGC extensions. We've certainly dabbled in catalogs and done pretty much the whole gamut of CET development, but we prefer to stay within the PGC, just inside the fancier stuff. It's a little bit more fun for us. We enjoy doing the renderings and the drawings and seeing what comes out of the full extensions, so that's where we spend most of our focus. Occasionally, as a company, we try to keep things as professional in terms of our development and what we were doing, but occasionally we try to have fun as well, and they try to keep us happy by doing things like throwing us inside trees, making us do pottery, and you can see the look of consternation on my face. I was not good at it. We went sailing a couple of weeks ago, actually, this year, and then sometimes we're at each other's throats. It happens. But then often we dress up pretty nice too. This is why they have Lauren and I be the face of the company. We are obviously the most photogenic.
Oh, for sure.
So the reason we started this presentation was because we had a client approach us recently, this was probably 4 or 5 months ago, who had been with a different development partner, and they'd been working with them on a full PGC extension for a few months. And towards the end of where they thought the project would be, they were informed that not only was the project only about 50% of the way they wanted it, where they wanted it, it was also about $140,000 over budget, which you can imagine didn't go over exceptionally well with really anybody. And so because of that, we went through a sort of forensic analysis of both what had been done with the previous partner, how their process was both at the development level and at the internal level. We went and looked through every piece of information we could find to try to lock in where the huge road bumps were. And the biggest thing we found was that there was not a pipeline or a cadence to be working with quality assurance or to have the projects come in front of the designers that would be using it. I'm a firm believer that if designers are not looking at the software before it goes out, there's no way it's going to be a decent piece of software to work with. So we kind of came up with a fun, handy visual guide for how extensions look with QA and without QA. And we're even sticking with the theme of the desert.
Yep.
Exactly.
Very helpful. All right.
So Lauren's going to talk a little bit more about where this comes into play.
So to kind of get more into detail on what exactly we mean. What is the difference between an extension that has good QA and which one that doesn't have QA? And there's 2 main differences. One is the speed at which we get the extension done and it gets to where you want, and also the quality of the extension itself. Of course, if you have quality assurance, you're going to have a quality extension. So kind of how does that show in the pipeline? We're talking about having a good pipeline with QA. So we're going to kind of go through how the pipeline looks from the development side, as I'm a developer, and and through the QA side. And this is just how we do it. This obviously isn't how you have to set it up, but this just using us as an example of how we set up our pipelines. So starting with the development pipeline, when we get a project, the first thing you're going to have to do is gather information on what the project actually is, what the requirements are. So this is when we would get like our price list, our data, anything that we need to be able to get what you want. And then obviously we're developers, have to develop. That's the bulk of it. And then next is our code review, which is where us developers look at the actual code and kind of ensure that it's done in the best way. This is sort of our like mini QA for our programming. And then it goes to internal testing to make sure the stuff is working correctly. And then we send it to the clients for them to test, and then it will go live. So in theory, us developers can do all of these steps except for the client testing. Of course, the clients have to do that. But the more time you're spending gathering information and internal testing, we have to do the code review part. But the more time we're doing all those other things, the less time we can develop. And we're developers, so that's what we want to be doing. So it would be great if we had some people that could help with the gathering information and with the internal testing.
It's a brilliant idea.
Someone who would maybe be more suited for that, because they hire us because we're good at developing, not really because we're good at testing. So if only we had some sort of quality assurance team to help us out. But of course, how do we bridge the gap if we do have someone else helping out with internal testing?
It's a difficult question.
I know. What can we expect from both sides of the coin here? So, handy little guide here. What the devs will expect from QA then is that they get clear and detailed tickets to work off of, because we have to know what we're making, and we have to be able to get further clarification if necessary. If QA cannot tell us what they're looking for, then we're both kind of screwed. And then we also expect thorough testing that covers the scope of the ticket. We expect the testers to be testing. Good.
Okay. And as far as the QA side of things, we're really looking, and this comes from both clients and from developers, very clear instructions on what the behavior needs to be. If it's coming from Lauren to me, I need to know what she is attempting to do. And if it's something that has been requested from a client, I need to know what you need from us. So the more detail, the better. You'll probably notice I tend to talk a lot. I'm a big fan of over-communication. We also expect any details on potentially confusing behaviors. As we try to make extensions as universal as possible, and CET in general, there is a certain language in using the extensions that makes sense, but there's always going to be cases that are unique to you. And so we need to make sure we know what those are and that we are getting them to your specifications. And we also need to make sure that from all sides, any issues that's mentioned in the ticket is accounted for when we are testing it. So our responsibilities as QA, they tend to be very far and wide. There's a lot of holes that we fill in, but from the main part, what we are doing is information gathering is a huge part of our jobs. Again, as Lauren said, programmers are here to program, and you guys are not cheap because you're actually talented. And so we want to make sure that you pay for what they are doing and not paying them to do jobs that somebody else can do. We also offer a user perspective. I am not a designer. I do not have the artistic skills, certainly, and I don't have the experience with CET to the degree that somebody that's been using it for a decade has, certainly. But when it comes to user perspectives, that is about as alien as possible from a developer's perspective. They understand how the software works underneath the hood, how you're using it in the field, complete mystery. So QA needs to have a lot of face time with you, and we need to be talking to you so that we are the representatives of designers inside of Platinum Edge. We also do things like make the builds, and that's just one of those other under the hood things. Like the code has to end up in CET, and we are the bridge to sort of make sure that happens and make sure the code gets to you. And then we're also sort of the liaison between devs and clients. Makes us sound way fancier than we are, but basically it just means you have to listen and talk to me a bunch. and so do the developers, because I'm going to be the person that's conveying all of this to everybody.
So you don't have to talk to us awkward devs all the time.
Or at least we have a point so we know what topic to cover immediately.
Yes.
Makes it way easier for all of us. So this is our pipeline. And this is something that where the development pipeline is fairly insular. It's with the devs and within Platinum Edge. This pipeline involves the client more than it involves them pretty much the rest of the process. Like this is where your input comes into play. Our setup is the QA will sit. We're going to make a board, which we will cover momentarily. We will also cover most ticket creations at the beginning of a project, and then that will shift to clients towards the end and with maintenance. And then if we find something, we'll also make tickets. We also have something called a backlog session. This is, in looking through this new extension that we're working on, I think that this point here is where most of the issues could have been avoided. We make sure that every 2 weeks, at least, if not every week, you are on a call with QA and likely myself. And then we will talk through all of the tickets. The developers don't get to be in here. We don't need their input. We get to sit, talk about what you need. We get to talk about what you are seeing, what problems there are, what things you've loved, etc. Like, we get to go through all of the tickets. We get to vet things and make sure that you are getting everything you want. And the developers have all of the information that they need, and they can just be over in the corner doing their thing. Mm-hmm. We also do the internal testing, obviously. This, along with backlog session, is where the project we're working with is really going off the rails. There wasn't enough internal testing on either side, particularly on the developer side. We try to make sure that everything that goes to a client has passed QA. And while that doesn't mean that there are never any rejects, there should not be anything that we are not well aware of happening. And then we have the smoke testing, which comes internally. The developers and the QA, all of us jump on the boat at the same time. We test the builds before they go to you, and we make sure our work is there. So every person is responsible for making sure it's ready to go. And then we send the build, and everybody's happy. This is where we're going to get into some of the nitty-gritty in terms of board creation. Organization for any of these projects is brutal and can be nightmarish. This is the way that we use it. We use a program called ZenHub. It's my personal favorite, but a lot of people use Jira. There's plenty of other project management software out there like this. There isn't a universal best one. There isn't a magic bullet. Do what works for you. This is certainly just how we do it. The more important thing here is sort of the organization and the pipeline we follow, which we feel is fairly universal, even if the program you're using isn't. So we start very, very simple. The columns are all marked about as clearly as possibly can be. New issues, no one's confused on what that is. Icebox means it can just be ignored for as long as we need to. Backlog, this is where tickets on that backlog session we talked about get vetted. And we go through all of them bit by bit, and that means they are ready for a developer to work on. Typically, the rule is devs don't touch anything that's been put into new issues, because that means QA hasn't looked at it yet. We have a section for models for when new people's models works, but that's, again, not something that's necessarily universal. We list what's in progress so that either you, myself, a developer, whoever it is on the project can see exactly what's in progress as it's in progress. So there's never any doubt, never any questions. If this column is empty, we need to ask what's going on. These columns are for you folks to talk to us. If we have questions, instead of having to make a phone call, send out an email, whatever, try to hope somebody's on Slack, what we'll do is we'll put our questions in the tickets, slide them over to here, and then when you have a chance, you can just put the information in, drop it into more info needed. Makes life extremely easy. Means we don't have to try to coordinate Zoom meetings. We don't have to eat into each other's times if there's something else that's going on. If it's an emergency, we reach out, but otherwise we always try to use these columns. We have the test rejected column, which we try to keep empty, but often no, not so lucky. And then we have a few more. Internal testing means we're looking at it. This is a column that is strictly for developers and QA, just making sure code goes where it needs to, ready for build, and then build testing. So each of these columns represents a level of testing, actually. So internal testing obviously means one of our QA is looking at it. Excellent. Merge means that a developer is doing the code review that Lauren mentioned. Ready for build means that it's ready for us to put into a build and go out to clients. But build testing happens first. So after we've built, we've already tested on this side of the column, but we test it again. And then we go through until it's closed. And that's really it's about as simple as can be in terms of how these pipelines are lined up. But it is incredible how much easier they make your life just as following that line. And we have it set up in order specifically so that it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, et cetera down the line. So the backlog sessions, I'm going to talk a little bit more about those. These are one of my favorite parts of the week, probably. This is actually just a really fun time because it's usually a smaller group. Again, it's probably you and then myself and a developer, or for a QA, sorry. And we leave the developers out of it, so it's a little bit more relaxed. But the point of it is we get to vet the tickets first. Not oftentimes, but occasionally an issue will be brought either by a QA or by a client, and it may not actually be an issue, or there may be a solution somewhere else, or one that's coming down the line that we know about. So this lets us eliminate any tickets that might be either too confusing, cover somewhere else, things that may not be relevant in the moment. So it just lets us sort of get our ducks in a row early. It also gives us a better idea of what designers need, because at the end of the day, designers are really the important part of the CET experience because that's who's using the software. It's very easy for developer partners to kind of get lost in the development side of things. And then we forget that the designers are who has to use it. So this is where we get your input. We also get answers to questions instead of having to wait on developers. We can be given a list of questions, say on a Monday, we'll have the backlog on Tuesday, and we can go through all of these things, and it just makes life a lot easier. So now we're going to go cover a few things on how we handle tickets when they go through the process of getting tested.
Mm-hmm.
Fun times. So when a test is rejected, what do? We have a few paths we take before it ever has to go in front of any of our clients. My personal thing is go talk to the dev. Lauren and I sit very close to each other. If I have a question, I can just yell at her and we'll figure it out immediately. Quite easy. And that just saves everyone a lot of headache. We can confer with other testers. We now, when QA started, it was literally me learning CET and flying by the seat of my pants. Now we have 3 QAs who have, decades of experience actually combined at this point, like people that are extremely talented at their jobs. And so we get to talk to each other. If we have questions, we may just confer and, hey, does it work on your machine? Hey, can you tell me what you're seeing? And it's an excellent way for us to see if maybe we made a mistake before just rejecting a ticket outright. We also we'll ship it back if it is rejected, and we're going to say, hey, you messed up here and here, fix it. Mm-hmm. Pretty simple. Now, if it's passed, this is the best part.
Yay.
All we have to do is simply move it to the correct section on the board. We'll tell the devs they did an excellent job, unless we're mad at them, and then feel accomplished doing the least amount of work we have to do in a day.
Yay!
It's a great setup.
All right, so that's kind of the QA part of the pipeline, but the clients are also a very important part in making sure that a project is successful. You're obviously just as involved in it as we are. So a couple of things we expect from our clients is, of course, they're the masters of their data and products. We do not make furniture. We don't know how furniture is supposed to work. So we need you to tell us exactly how your furniture is supposed to work, and also what data is correct. We can't control that in most situations, so we rely on you to tell us what is correct and what isn't. And that also goes into, you have the final say in testing. We will test things into what we expect, what we understand that you want, but at the end of the day, you know better than any of us what exactly you want. And it might be that we make something to a certain set of requirements, and then by the time it gets to you, something might have changed. So you have that final say to make sure that it is what you want. And then we also expect our clients to be responsive and communicative. So, for example, like make sure that you're checking on the board in that more info needed column. If we do send you a question on Slack or something, please respond so we don't get blocked and we're able to keep developing. So now that we've kind of gone through that whole process and the nitty gritty of it, I think it's important that we go back and do a high level, how does QA actually change this process versus if it was just the developers talking with the clients and we didn't have any QA. So a couple bullet points. Adds agility, you get stuff faster. You're going to catch mistakes earlier, so there's less delay with getting builds out because as we work on stuff while we're developing, we're like, oh yeah, this works. And then we just send the build out, for example. Stuff might not all work nice together anymore, but we did things to stop and check it. So it stops stuff from that from happening. QA can also dedicate time to learning extensions. So something that we do is we don't like to keep a developer on the same client for an extended period of time because you might get burnt out. You might want to work on something new. But QA, we have QA assigned to a client indefinitely. I don't think we ever change unless there's like a crazy circumstance.
QA will cross-train on other clients to
Yeah.
be able to help, but we tend to have each person be a specialist.
Mm-hmm. So QA, they are able to take the time to learn how an extension works because each client has their own products that have their own quirks and way that they work. So if a developer gets put on a new project and they're like, hey, this thing is working sort of strangely, they don't have to go to the client and ask how their stuff should work because that doesn't make any sense. We're able to just go to the QA for that project and be like, hey, is this how this is supposed to work? And they'll be like, oh yeah, you just have to do this and this. So I'm like, oh, I didn't know that. So that helps from those sort of questions from happening. QA also gets more face time with the clients and can explain how things should work to devs. So kind of the same thing of if I get put on something and I'm like, I don't know how this is supposed to work. QA spends more time talking to the clients and has a better idea of the big picture of how something should work. So when we're developing something new, they can better explain to us in ways that we understand how something should work. Thankfully, devs don't have to spend time testing. Obviously, while we're working on something, we're going to check to make sure it's working, but we're not going to test it as in depth as QA would, partially because it's kind of a waste of time for us to do it because we're not really good at it anyway, so it's not going to be that helpful. We devs don't like to wreck our things, so we try not to break them too hard, but obviously testers have to do that, so we can trust QA to break our stuff pretty bad. It gets a second set of eyes on things because even if I were to test my own stuff, all too often it will work on my machine, so it must be fine. And then you pull it up on someone else's and it doesn't work. And just having that extra check is very helpful. So then the client doesn't get it and is like, why doesn't it work? Well, it worked on my machine. So.
We've banned the line "it works on my machine" from the office. No longer allowed to say it.
You'll get stuff thrown at you if you say that. But most importantly,
the biggest change that you're going to get when actually using QA is you're going to get change that saves money. Wow. But what really happens at the end of the day, and it's quite hilarious, is that nobody wants to spend a ton of money on a CET extension. Like, we all have to answer to somebody. Mm-hmm. And the way that we've streamlined this process allows us to maintain what we charge and still be giving people extensions at the lower rate at the end of the day. You're going to be spending less because we do have people that don't charge. Like, a lot of places will charge for QA as well. It's something that we include with our project simply to make sure that it is up to the right standard. Something that a lot of people tend to mistake when we refer to QA as well is they assume it means quality assurance person is in somebody that we hire to only sit there and test. But a big part of QA will be you, the users of the software. The ultimate QA is you. We expect you to know how the things work, to call out what's wrong, to suggest improvements. One thing that the CET ecosystem desperately needs is more input from designers on what is actually necessary. I think a lot of times the partners and configure and a lot of the developers that are making the software can lose sight of that. And so you being the advocate and the voice for your own extensions and making sure that the person you're partnering with to make it does the same thing, it's not only going to be a better project, it's going to be a cheaper project.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, at the end of the day, if you want quality software, you need quality assurance. So thank you, everybody, for listening.
Thank you.
Obviously, you can reach out to either of us at any point. I'm certainly open for questions or conversations on any of these topics. So feel free to reach to us, to Platinum Edge, and enjoy the rest of your virtual CET experience.
Yay!